All right. Well, good evening, everyone, and a very happy new year to you. And I'm really excited actually for the first of the year's show. Corey has been a repeat presenter here, and it's just been amazing to see. Every time you come back, Corey, I feel like I learn a little bit more about parrots, especially, but your birding photography in general. Like, I follow your page on Insta, I think, and also on
Yep.
Facebook. Just incredible, actually. Really appreciate what you share and then your passion for parrots. So welcome back, and
All right, thank you.
really, yeah, I'm really excited to hear and see your presentation. You have some exciting photographs that you shared with at least a
Oh,
few of them you shared with me in the recent past, and just incredible. So.
all right. Well, that's very kind of you. So let's go ahead and, whoops. No, it's not letting me advance my slide. Oh, here we go. Down here, maybe. Yeah. Okay, so just so you know who I am, I have been doing wildlife photography of all kinds since 2016. I'm a Nikon shooter, but the honest truth of it is that I am just a parrot fanatic. And my favorite thing to shoot when I'm doing wildlife photography is parrots in the wild. And I have pretty good images now of more than 100 parrot species. So I'm pretty dedicated to getting parrot pictures. So let me talk a little bit about parrots. Parrots belong to the order Psittaciformes. And in that order, there are somewhere between 385 and 410 species. It changes periodically as DNA sequencing merges species and splits species, and so it's always a little bit in flux. So even though 100 sounds like a lot, I have a long way to go before I get pictures of them all. One of the things about parrots is that of all the big families, orders of birds, they have the highest percent of threatened species. About a third of the species are listed as either vulnerable, endangered, or critically endangered on the International Union for Conservation of Nature Red List. The factors that involved in the population declines include habitat loss, like it is for almost everything. A big threat to parrots that's different than a lot of animals is that parrots are popular pets, and so there's a lot of poaching for the pet trade. They have trouble with feral predators in many locations where cat, feral cats, rats, stoats that aren't native to the area. Australia is a perfect example. They're all birds, but parrots in particular are having a lot of trouble. And they also can have very specialized diets. So not only can the parrots be in trouble because they're in trouble, they can be in trouble because the plant that they feed on is in trouble. And many of the threatened species live on small islands, so it doesn't take long to destroy the habitat of a small island. And they don't live anyplace else. They don't have any place to go. I just wanted to show this slide really quickly because I'll probably be saying some of these words during the talk. One of the things that's important are the lores, which is the space between the cere, where the nostrils are, and the eye, for example. And I don't know, it's bird photography. I know you guys know all the rest of this stuff, so I'm really not going to talk about it very much. But just take a look at all the different parts, and I'll probably be mentioning them sometime along the way. So let's go ahead and get into the pictures now. I'm going to start with the cockatoos because there are a number of cockatoos that rank pretty high up in my list of favorite parrots. The family is called the Cockatooidae, and there are 28 species in this family. It's a separate branch of the parrot family tree that stands by itself. They're found in Australia, shouldn't say Australian, Australia, New Guinea, and islands throughout the Eastern Pacific, all the way as far as the Philippines. There are 14 species of cockatoos that live in Australia. I've seen all of them, but I only have I have a crummy picture of one of them. The rest of them I have pretty good pictures of. I think that when most people think of cockatoos, they think of a white bird, but cockatoos actually come in black, brown, gray, and pink, often with some other colors mixed in. And as I said, some of my very favorite parrots are cockatoos. This is the red-tailed black cockatoo. It ranks way high up in amongst my favorite parrots. The picture on the left is a male, and the males are black, with this big broad band of red across their tail. It sits in all the tail feathers except for the middle two, so the band is broken into two parts. I just think that they're stunning. And this bird is almost 36 inches from the top of its head to the tip of the tail, so it's a very big bird. On the left, I have a picture of the female. I tried to do that as much as I could so you could see the difference between the males and females when there is sexual dimorphism. And you can see the female looks a little bit different. She's not quite as black. She has yellow edging to a lot of her feathers. And she sort of has an orangish band in her tail, but the band is broken up by stripes of the dark color. So they don't look exactly the same, but they're both beautiful in their own right. This is the other member of the Calyptorhynchus genus. It's called a glossy black cockatoo. I think it's sort of a funny name because they're brown, they're not black, and especially their head is brown. But they have that same red band on the tail that the red-tailed black cockatoo has, as you can see in the picture of the male on the left. And then on the right is the pair. This is a little unusual because the female has all these yellow markings that some people on her head that people think make her more attractive than the male. But you can barely see in the picture that she has that red band on her tail, but it's also broken up by brown stripes, just like in the red-tailed black cockatoo. This picture. Here's another black cockatoo. This is the second genus of black cockatoos, the Zanda black cockatoos. And this is the yellow-tailed black cockatoo. The female is on the left, the male is on the right. They're very similar in appearance, but if you'll notice, the female's yellow cheek is actually brighter than the male's, and the eye ring of the male is reddish pink, and in the female it's dark. And those are the only two ways you can tell them apart. Um, they have a small crest. The females is not erected, but the males is erected, so you can sort of what it looks like when they erect their crest. Their Latin name is funaria, so sometimes they're called funeral cockatoos. I'm not quite sure why people thought they looked any worse or mournful than the other black cockatoos, but that's just the way it is. And these are the other two cockatoos in the Zanda genus. And I put them together because they look so much alike. But I put these pictures up because you can tell the one big difference between them. You'll notice the bird on the left, which is the Carnaby's black cockatoo, has a short beak, and it's actually broader. You can't tell. And the Bawden's black cockatoo on the right has a very long, narrow beak that's specially adapted for reaching into the pods of the eucalyptus tree that he's in. And you can see sticking his beak in there to pull the seeds out. So their ranges actually overlap quite a bit. They look really similar, but no hybrids have ever been seen. And they eat different foods. Again, they have the same difference between male and female. It happens that the Bawden's on the right is a male. You can see the red ring, and that the white is not so bright as the female Carnaby's on the left. I should say, if anybody has any questions while I'm talking, please don't hesitate to interrupt me. I'm happy to take any questions.
Actually, Corey, just remind us these are all in Australia?
So every cockatoo that I'm showing you is Australian.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, every one. These are found in southwestern Australia, sort of around Perth. Perth is a funny city. It's the largest city that's the farthest from any other large city in the world. So it just sits there out by itself, way out away from the rest of civilized Australia. Um, these are palm cockatoos. The male is displaying with his wings spread, and the female is looking at him. So he was standing up on this tree stump way high up and calling, and the female has kind of come in to take a look. Her crest is up and his crest is down. This is a very early branch off the cockatoo tree. It's an ancient species. It's found in Australia and New Guinea. In Australia on the peninsula, the York Peninsula that sticks up on the northeast corner of Australia. I was really excited to see them. The male will actually court by putting a stick in his hand and pound it on the trunk like a drum. So it's a tool-using species, which I also think is pretty interesting. And this isn't really one of my very favorite cockatoos with the weird name of gang cockatoo. Male on the left, female on the right. We saw this the Australian Capital Territory, which is sort of in the center of the country. It's farther east, but in the middle. The male has this amazing red head, and with fimbriatum means that it's frilly. He has this frilly crest, which is really great, I think. And the female is beautiful again, subtly beautiful in her own right, on the right side. And another beautiful cockatoo. This is called a pink cockatoo. It's sort of a funny name. Leadbeater, who it's named after, was somebody that was importing animals to London in the 1850s. And so he was very well known as someone as a source of things. And so he got his name on it. The name ended up being changed to Major Mitchell's cockatoo, and then it turned out Major Mitchell had slaughtered some Aborigines in the 1800s, and so that name was taken away, and now it's called a pink cockatoo. The bird on the left has a little melon in its mouth, and it's actually the same species as the watermelon. If you look at it, you go, wait a minute, yeah, it sort of looks like a tiny watermelon. And that's where our watermelon come from. But the fruit that he's eating, the fruit he's holding, it's very bitter. But they don't eat the fruit. They just pick the seeds out of it and eat it. And the picture on the right is a backlit cockatoo. I'm a big fan of backlit lighting, and I really think it brings out a different view of the bird, lets you see the color, and it just glows. And I just threw this picture into the pink cockatoo because I thought you ought to see what his crest looks like and when it's raised because it's a really beautiful crest.
Mm,
There are
yeah.
the other subspecies. This is the western subspecies. The eastern subspecies actually has a yellow stripe through the middle of the red on the crest. It's really beautiful, but I haven't seen that cockatoo. I haven't seen that subspecies. I've only seen this one. This is a really common cockatoo in Australia called a galah. Sometimes you'll hear them called rose-breasted cockatoos. I like these pictures, one, because they show that this is, despite being common, it's really beautiful. The Australians don't think of this bird very much. It's sort of like some of our birds that are very common and we don't think very much of them, like male mallard ducks and robins. And we just say, oh, it's just a robin. They go, oh, it's just a galah. But I think they're really beautiful. And you'll notice on the left is a female, her eye is red, and on the right is the male, his eye is dark. And that's very common in the lighter colored cockatoos, is the only way you can tell the males and females apart is by the eye color.
Mm.
And I put this in because the cockatiel, which you can walk into your local pet store and see, is a native Australian member of the cockatoo family. And I can't tell you how excited I was to see these birds in the wild, because they're all over the place in the pet stores, and you just have to stop and step back and realize, no, they used to be wild birds, and there still are wild birds out there. Here we tried. They were a very wary species, and we just had a great deal of trouble getting near them. And then we were just sitting by this little stream. And all of a sudden, five or six of them flew in and started drinking, just, I don't know, 20 feet away from us or so. You can tell we were a little close to them because the female's not quite in focus. And I had changed my f-stop from F4 to F8 to try to get them both in focus, but I was so close that F8 wasn't enough. I needed to go to F12, F13 maybe, which I just never use when I'm shooting. So I missed this one a little bit, but you can certainly see the difference between the males and the females here. And here now we're finally into the white cockatoos. Um, this is called the little Corella. You can see on the picture on the left that he's actually got bare skin around its eye that's blue. Carrying on the left, on the right, carrying nesting material. On the left is just a picture that I love because it looks like he's got a cape and he's hiding his eyes, hiding his face behind his cape. And then here's another Corella. This is the long-billed Corella. A picture on the left to show you again that bare skin around the eye, some red, a little bit of red on the face, and the picture on the right I like because it looks like he's walking like Groucho Marx.
Mhm.
They use that long bill to dig into the dirt to eat bulbs and roots and corms and stuff. That's what they feed on. And
Mm.
now I'm looking at this and I realize I didn't put any pictures in of the sulfur-crested cockatoo, and I'm sorry, but that's the way it goes. Too late to put it in now. So let me talk about some of the other old world parrots. Australia is often labeled on early maps as the land of parrots. There are a lot of parrots in Australia, about uh, 55 species.
Mm,
Um, the funny thing about Australians is they call all of their members of the parrot family, they call them parrots, whether they look like parakeets or they don't look like parakeets. And then there's a small group of birds that they call lorikeets. So there are no parakeets in Australia. Everything is called a parrot. But I'm going to show you some pictures that you can look and say, oh no, that is a parakeet. The difference between parrots and parakeets usually is parrots are usually bigger. They usually have a stocky body and a short tail. Parakeets are usually a little smaller with a slender body and a long tail. They're easy to tell apart, but Australians don't believe in it. But there is a group of parrots. There's a little group called the Lorrini, which is made up of lories and lorikeets. There are no lories in Australia, which are bigger parrot-like birds. But they have lorikeets and they don't call them lories. They call them lorikeets. So it doesn't make any sense at all. And these birds specialize in eating pollen and nectar. They're all actually called the brush-tongued parrots because they have little papillae in the end of their tongue that they can stick into a flower and soak the nectar up like using a mop.
mm,
All right, so now I'll digress a little bit. This is a red-winged parrot. This is absolutely one of my favorite parrots. I think it is just stunning. This is the male. The female has very little red on her wing. She doesn't have the black on her back. She's just that nice green. But I show this picture a lot because a lot of times people will look at pictures and think, oh, it's just a bird on a stick. And I think that sometimes putting a picture of a bird with no distractions, where you just see the beauty of the bird, is worthwhile. This picture story is not about that it's grooming its mate, that it's flying. This picture is it's beautiful, and that's the story. I don't know. A lot of people don't believe that, but I sure do. These birds are called fig parrots. They're tiny. They're smaller than a sparrow. They're really tiny. And as you know, by their name, they eat figs. So here they are eating some little figs. That's the female on the left with the buff colored cheeks and the male on the right with the red colored cheeks. They're called double-eyed because someone thought that the blue in front of the eye of the male looked like another eye. I think they're crazy. The figs that they're eating are called sandpaper figs. They have a rough, kind of sandpaper texture on the outside. And I picked one of them, bit into it, and I have to tell you, it just tasted awful. But that's what they eat, so I can't say anything. This is an Australian king parrot, another bird that's a stunningly beautiful bird. The male in flight on the left, and I include this one as a flight shot because you get to see that the color of his rump is just that beautiful, almost purple. And the female is on the right, not quite as colorful. And son of a gun, look at that. I saw wild budgerigars when I was in Australia. The budgies, as people call them, or in this country, sometimes they just call them parakeets, are the third most popular pet in the world behind dogs and cats. They've been bred in captivity since the early 1800s, 1820 or so. So there are many generations. All kinds of color morphs have been selectively bred, but this is what they look like in the wild. We
mm,
saw a huge literally hundreds. I don't know if it's quite 1,000, but certainly close to them, feet drinking in this little water hole in the center of Australia. It's called the Red Center, and the reason it's called the Red Center is it's got all this red clay. And they were funny when they fed. They would 100 of them would be circling around this water hole, and they'd get lower and lower and lower, and then all of a sudden one, and then all of them would just drop down and drink, and they'd sit there for 3 seconds and take off again because that's when budgies are small and they are at risk when they're on the ground and they just don't like being there. So you can see them flying in. This is a little group of a bigger group flying in, and they just don't stay there at all and they fly off. The picture on the right shows a nest cavity. The female is the bird in the nest, and the male is feeding her. That's called allo feeding, when one animal feeds another, one bird feeds another. And the female is responsible for incubating the eggs. The male doesn't do that, so he's bringing her food all day because she's not going out and feeding. But this picture does show how you can tell the difference between males and females. The only difference is the color of their cere, which is that little thing above their beak where their nostrils are. And you'll see the male cere is blue and the female cere is brown. And that's how you can tell them apart. I'm going to show you some pictures of rosellas. Rosellas are what I would call a parakeet from Australia. There's a group of five of them, I think, five species. All of them are endemic to Australia. This is the crimson rosella, um, obviously named for its color. Um, the males and females are very similar. The females are a little duller in color. But it's a funny species because it used to be two other species have now been made into subspecies in this one. So the actual color of the birds goes from red to orange to yellow, depending on where you are in their territory. I've seen all this the nominate subspecies, and I've also seen one that's sort of between the orange and the yellow because it kind of grades across their range. Um, but anyway, very, very beautiful bird. This is what I was mentioning. These are the same crimson rosellas, kind of on the orangish side, getting towards yellow. But it's the same species. They look so different. Um, you'll notice that they have a little red band on their forehead, and the crimson rosella, of course, doesn't have that because it's all red. But as they get oranger and yellower, that becomes a more prominent feature. Another rosella, the eastern rosella, certainly a really colorful bird. The males on the left, the females on the right. It's sort of true of these rosellas in general that the males are more brightly colored, and you can just see that he's got that big solid red, and her red is broke on her chest is broken up a little bit. There is a subspecies where the outline of the feathers on the back is yellow instead of green, and that's called a gold-mantled rosella, but it's a subspecies of this bird. And here are two more, both males in this case. On the left is the largest rosella called the green rosella, which is native to Tasmania. It lives on Tasmania only. And the western rosella is the smallest rosella, and that's the bird on the right again, a male. And lastly, I think, is the pale-headed rosella, female on the left, male on the right. You can see the male just has more blue. There are two subspecies of this bird. One has blue cheeks, which is what we're looking at. One the cheeks are not blue, they're yellow. So but it just it they mix easily and it kind of grades across their range, going from really blue like these birds to having much less blue and no blue cheeks. Some of the birds that I put up not because I think the pictures are great, because I wanted you to see a critically endangered species. This is a swift parrot. Swift parrots breed in Tasmania, fly across the Bass Strait to Australia, and overwinter in Australia. Um, I was really surprised at how small they are. I thought it was a rosella-sized bird, maybe 18 inches in length, and it's less than 10 inches from the top of its head to the tip of its tail, sort of 8 inches or so. It's really tiny. And they nest in cavities in the trees. Unfortunately, sugar gliders, a marsupial that's native to mainland Australia, has been introduced to Tasmania. And the sugar gliders, it's a marsupial like a flying squirrel, um, eat the babies and the eggs in the nest. And these birds have no way of coping with it. They've never had a predator that invaded their nests. So the number of females has dropped dramatically. There are many more males than females because only the females uh, brood the eggs. And and Tasmania doesn't seem to the government of the state of Tasmania's government is not very conservation oriented, and they don't seem to care very much that this bird is disappearing. Less than 300 of these birds in the wild right now.
Mm.
Corey, can I ask a question if you don't mind?
Whoops, I don't know. I had to go back. Okay.
Yeah, actually, that's a good example. So I see a lot of these birds on eucalyptus.
Yep.
Is that pretty common? Do they get any
So,
nutrition from that?
so you saw there that many of the big cockatoos eat eucalyptus seeds.
Hmm.
The they're in a very specialized way. The glossy black cockatoo eats what a tree called a she oak or a casuarina tree, and they almost eat nothing but the seeds of that tree.
Hmm.
So they're very specialized in what they eat. You know, the black cockatoo with the white-tailed black cockatoo with the
Yep.
sharp beak.
Yep.
It doesn't eat anything else because that's what its beak is for. It's to take the seeds out of those eucalyptus pods. This bird is specialized to eating nectar and pollen. So it's on this tree that's in bloom because it's eating the nectar and pollen from these eucalyptus flowers. I mean, eucalyptus are real common in Australia, so the birds take advantage of it. So it's a good observation, but a lot of them are very dependent on various eucalyptus
I
trees.
was not joking when I said you would regret checking your own city. This awful news break lets you see almost all the crimes happening around you.
Mary, can you please go on mute?
Yeah, sorry. Sorry.
No worries. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Thanks, Mary.
So anyway, so yes, this is a eucalyptus tree. This is the eucalyptus tree that they like.
Wow.
Uh,
Yeah.
we were lucky to see them when it was in bloom. We saw a good number of them, but they'll tell you they were most of the time really high up in the trees, hard to get a picture of, and they were in constant motion. They would be moving, weaving in and out between the branches, and very rarely would they just stick their head out to grab a flower. So I feel lucky to have gotten some reasonable pictures of them.
It's amazing. Yeah.
Yeah. Oops, that's the same person still.
Sorry.
Yeah. Um, this I put this one up because it's another critically endangered species. And it has the same breeding pattern as the prior species. They breed in Tasmania and they fly across the Bass Strait to overwinter in Australia. It's called an orange-bellied parrot. You can see his belly is orange. Um, the thing that's funny about them is they breed in a very small area of Tasmania. Their breeding range has contracted, and they're heavily. There's a group of people that really watch out for them, and so every year they know exactly how many birds come back to Tasmania to breed. And the year I took this picture, the number was 92. So there were 92 adults left. There's a lot, these birds breed pretty well in captivity, so they keep supplementing the population with captive bred birds, but they have some trouble getting the bred birds to fly across the Bass Strait and come back. And a lot of the birds that fly back across the strait don't come back. And I think it's a feral cat and stoat problem in Australia, where these birds just don't know how to deal with mammals. They grew up with marsupials. And so they keep supplementing the population to keep them in the wild, but down to 92, which is just crazy. And this is a red-capped parrot, another parrot from southwestern Australia. When we made our trip down there, it's the only member of its genus, and it is kind of a little bit different looking as parrots go, but it's very beautiful, a very beautiful bird. They're a seed eater. They usually feed on the ground. And this is a male on the left, female on the right, mulga parrot. Another name for this parrot is the many-colored parrot because the male just is so colorful. I was really excited to see them. I have to say that I'm not a big fan of taking pictures of birds sitting on a wire, but it's the only time I saw them, so you get these pictures. And I guess at least the wire's rusty and the fence post is all weathered, so maybe it's excused a little bit. And this is a hooded parrot. It's one of three species of parrots in Australia that nest in uh, terrestrial termite mounds, on termite mounds that are on the ground. One of them is extinct, and two of them are left, and they're both endangered because the grasslands that they live in are being turned into farmland, and so they don't get enough to eat. The males on the left, the females on the right. I think that one of the things that's really funny about these birds is that they nest in these termitaria. They dig a hole into it. It takes them about 2 weeks to make a nest chamber and dig the hole into the termite mound. And once they go in there and start laying their eggs, a moth comes in and lays its eggs in the cavity. And the moth's caterpillars, the caterpillars hatch out of the eggs and they make a layer of silk on the bottom so the birds can't get to them and they eat the feces of the birds. Um, each one of the three of them has its own species of moth that lives with it. So it's not the same moth, it's a different species in the same genus. And when the one species called the paradise parrot that went extinct, the moth also went extinct. I mean, it's what a crazy story in conservation. And this is the Australian ringneck. Another bird I'd say was a parakeet. The nominate species is on the right, the green bird with the yellow ring around its neck. But as I was describing for the crimson rosella, a number of four species have now been combined into this one species, and they look different. The bird on the left is also a ringneck and in the same species. Um, there's one species, the biggest species has a green belly instead of yellow like the one on the right, and the species on the left, there's one that doesn't have the red band and is a paler, more pastel color. So they're similar, but not the same. These are both males. And then I mentioned there were some lorikeets in Australia. These are nectar eaters with this brush tongue that they can soak up nectar with. This one's called a rainbow lorikeet for good reason. I really love the picture on the right of the bird preening his tail feather, but I put the picture on the portrait in on the left so you could just see how colorful they are. They're just really very beautiful. And here, a picture of two more lorikeets. These are pretty small birds, um, maybe a little bigger than a sparrow. The musk lorikeet on the right and the purple crown lorikeet on the left. The males and the females look just about the same. But here's another picture, Sri, where there's a bird that's eating pollen from a eucalyptus tree on the right, and actually on both sides, you can see the red flowers on both sides. That's just what they eat because that's what's around.
Oh, incredible.
Yeah. I made a trip to New Zealand to see the kakapo, which I saw but did not get a picture of, unfortunately. But New Zealand's funny. The first branch off the parrot family tree are New Zealand parrots. And I put this one up because I saw this New Zealand parrot, and look how different it looks than the other parrots. It's not green. Look at the beak shape is funny. But and I thought they were kind of dull, and then I saw them, and they have red and brown and gold, and they're really actually very beautiful. But they're kind of different. And so there you go, called a caca of all things. Um, but the one on the right calling and the one on the left, they were eating the flowers of this red tree because they're also nectar eaters and pollen eaters and eat flowers. But the thing that's funny about New Zealand is that there were two waves of parrot invasions of New Zealand, and one was that original one, and that may have been there when they broke off from Australia, that makes those funny looking parrots. And then a second group of parrots that are much more typical looking came in, and here are two of them. And I'm not quite sure. I only put one name down here, but the red crowned is on the right, and the one on the yellow is called yellow crowned. Um, and in New Zealand, they're called kakarikis, which is sort of the Maori name for them. But I don't know, they're cockatiel-sized birds. And I saw them. So there's six birds that are endemic to New Zealand. I've seen four of them and have pictures of three of them. I'm going to have to make a trip back there, I think. I sort of made I call it a surgical strike to see the kakapo, one of the New Zealand endemics. They're nocturnal and flightless. Pretty weird for a parrot. And they're so the only and they were wiped out by stoats till there was just literally a handful of them left, less than 20 of them left. And so they captured them all and put them on an island that had been cleared of um, placental mammals. And there's now little bit more than 200 of them. But you have to be invited to go on the island to see them. And I just had someone that knew a way to get me on the island. And so I saw them, but I didn't get a picture of them. Um, so I have to go, and I just went there just to do that. So getting the pictures of these other three species was just a bonus. The one on the right, I actually got on the island we were at where the kakapo were. Had looking for the kakapo, worst hike I've ever been on. Straight up, straight down, straight up, straight down on a trail full of potholes, mud, and roots. I think I fell 6 times doing about 3 mile hike. Not good. So that's the end of the old world parrots that I chose to show. And here we'll show some New World parrots. So the macaws, which are sort of often iconic bird, people think of iconic birds of the tropical rainforest. There's 16 species of macaws, and I've actually seen them all, but I have good pictures of 14 of them. Um, but there are a lot of parrots that live in Central and South America. And one of the genuses is called Amazona, and it's the bird you think of as a parrot. It's a big, stocky green bird, and they're good talkers. They make a big deal in the pet trade. But there are also a large number of parakeets that also end up in the pet trade, and a lot of times they're called conures. So let's look at some pictures. So here is the one things I mentioned, the kakapo, that nocturnal parrot that is flightless. So it's about the size of a chicken, and it looks like a chicken in its size, and it's the heaviest parrot by quite a bit. Um, but the hyacinth macaw, which is 9 inches, so it's a big bird. I like them because if you look at the picture on the left, it looks like the bird's smiling. They always look like they're smiling, which is pretty funny, I think. And then nice to get them in flight. One of the characteristics of macaws, the reason that they're separated out from the other parrots, is that they have bare skin on their face. No other parrots have just bare skin on their face but the macaws. There are 3 species of parrots that have no feathers on their head, but not just on their face. And you can see the hyacinth macaw just has a little bit of bare skin. Well, you'll see some of them have more sitting behind his beak and then also around his eye. Most of the parrots in the New World are monomorphic, so I'll stop showing you males and females here because I can't tell them apart. And this is another one of my very favorite parrots. It's in the same genus as the hyacinth macaw, but it's smaller, called Lear's macaw. And I like it because of the story of its name and that it gives a reason why we shouldn't be doing what people are trying to do, which is get rid of people's names from the names of animals. So Lear's macaw is named after Edward Lear. And if you're not familiar with Edward Lear, you know Edward Lear because he wrote the poem The Owl and the Pussycat and was famous for writing limericks. But when he was young, between when he was 18 and 21 years old, he was a wildlife painter. And the Duke of York asked him to come to Knowsley, which is his lodge, to paint the birds in his menagerie. And he did. And he published the first English language book solely devoted to parrots. And in that book, he had a picture of a parrot that he labeled Hyacinth Macaw. And that book was published in by subscription, just like Audubon did of the Birds of America. You'd get a few pictures periodically from 1833 to 1836 or so. Um, And in about 1863, a ornithologist, a naturalist named Charles Bonaparte, who was a descendant of Napoleon, looked at the picture of the hyacinth macaw in Lear's book and said, "That's not a hyacinth macaw." And using that picture, he wrote a paper describing a new species of macaw that he named Lear's macaw. So I think it's such a fun, and he was right that it wasn't a hyacinth macaw, it was a Lear's macaw. You'll notice when we saw the hyacinth macaw, it had just that little bit of color behind the beak, and the Lear's macaw has a semicircle. And the Lear's macaw, it's hard to tell here, his skin is yellow and his eye ring is orange, and he has a teardrop on it that the hyacinth macaw doesn't have. And you can easily notice the green wash of his head that the hyacinth macaw also doesn't have. So we have this macaw that's named because Edward Lear, that's named after Edward Lear because Edward Lear named it incorrectly. I think it's such a great story. And I think we should keep calling it Lear's macaw. In theory, you're supposed to call them indigo macaws now, but first, they're not indigo. And second, nobody calls them indigo macaws because they're Lear's macaws. Anyway, I think it's an interesting story. So here's a iconic rainforest, Denison the scarlet macaw. You all have seen scarlet macaws, and they are big and they are beautiful. The birds on the right are drinking mineral-rich water. That cave behind them is at the bottom of a cliff, and the water is seeping out, having run down from the top of the cliff to the bottom of the cliff. So it's sort of like a clay lick, but it's a soak. And why the parrots eat clay and why they drink this water is not entirely clear. Some people have good evidence that it's because their diet is deficient in sodium, but they haven't really shown that the water has a lot of sodium in it. But they eat it at times when they need sodium, when the females are laying eggs, for example. And there was a good study done where they uh, fed the birds an alkaloid compound and showed that the blood level of the alkaloid was much lower if they let them eat clay, suggesting that there was something in the clay that was binding to alkaloids and not letting it be let it be absorbed from the gut. And so but I think both of those could be true. The two of them are fighting all the time about who's right, but it doesn't mean that they both can't be right. Anyway, so sort of a clay lick. They're drinking this special water. And then in one of the best days I've had doing photography, we were on the Osa Peninsula in Costa Rica, and in a cleared area that was a schoolyard. On the side, there was a palm tree with big clusters of palm fruits. And scarlet macaws were coming in and eating them. They'd fly in, they'd twist off one of the fruits, then they'd take it in their beak and carry it back to where they could roost in a tree, and they'd tear the palm fruit apart till they get to the pit of it, and they ate the pit. And so we sat there for 2.5 hours taking pictures of these birds flying back and forth and back and forth. It was really, really fun. And this is another great day of photography that I had. These pictures were taken in Brazil at a place called the Barraca das Araras, which means the sinkhole of the macaws. And the wall that you're seeing on the picture of the right is the side of a sinkhole. And the sinkhole is about 500 feet across and 300 feet deep. And the macaws roost and nest in caves in the cliffs, in holes in this on the cliffs of this sinkhole. And these are red and green macaws. And you can they built a platform you can stand on, kind of on two sides of the sinkhole, and just watch the macaws fly around. And it was just so much fun. So here's they fly around in groups or in pairs. The one on the left, probably a mated pair. I think it's funny. They always look like they're flying in synchrony. They flap their wings at the same time. Um, and then I think I put one more picture just so you could see there was behavior going on. So these birds were standing on a stick that was of a tree that was growing out of the side, and they're allopreening, where one is preening the feathers of the other. Parrots preen themselves mostly using their beak and their tongue, but they can't reach the top of their head and the back of their head. So as you can see, it kind of looks like it feels good to have someone else do that for you to get the feathers in good shape. Excuse me. Another member of the genus Ara, which is the big macaws, the blue and yellow macaw. I'm sure you guys have all seen this, but again, such a thrill to see them in the wild instead of in captivity. Quite a stunning bird, and another kind of iconic bird of the rainforest. They're a little bit funny because they like to nest in palm trees and they prefer to have palm trees where the top is blown off so they can climb in through the top to make a cavity, which I think is crazy because you have to wonder what happens when it rains. But but I guess if you've ever seen what's inside of a palm tree, it's kind of porous material, and I guess the rain must just drain out because that's where they nest all the time. These are great green macaws. There is a NGO in Costa Rica dedicated to trying to preserve this species. I was on the board for some time because it's a critically endangered species. Maybe there's 1,500 of them left in the wild. They're big macaws. They're not as colorful as the scarlet or the blue and yellow, but they are beautiful in their own right. I think it's really funny. The birds on the left were nesting in this tree hollow, and the tree hollow, couldn't show the top of it and get a close up of the birds because it was maybe 10 feet tall, which is and the hole, which is crazy. But there they were, and they were not having success nesting because their nests kept being poached by people taking the babies out to sell them. But anyway, great green macaws. They're one of the birds that has a specialized diet. They eat mountain, they feed, they get 70% of their calories from eating mountain almonds. Mountain almonds have a nut that's very hard to crack, so they have no competition for the food, but the mountain almonds are also endangered. The wood is very valuable, so people are illegally cutting them down to sell the wood. The wood's really beautiful and it's a hardwood. And here's aloe preening again. It kind of shows us. Every time I see one of these pictures, I think, boy, it must feel good. Paw that I just showed you, but you can see the beak is smaller, the head is smaller, the green is a little different color. They actually used to be considered the same subspecies of the same species until DNA sequencing showed that they weren't that closely related. This picture was taken in Mexico. They're a Mexican species. And this is the smallest macaw. So we talked about a macaw that's 39 inches, a meter long, and this one's about 14 inches long. So they really vary in length. This is the red-shouldered macaw, and I put this picture up so you could see his red shoulder. Very so small macaw, popular in the pet trade because they're so small. And two more macaw species. I hope you've been noticing how they all have that bare skin on their face. On the left is a yellow-collared macaw who's eating these uh, little green fruits of a tree. We were actually in a boat on a river coming around the corner, and I just said the guy who was running the boat, I said, "Stop, stop, stop!" And everyone said, "What are you yelling about?" I said, "Look, there are yellow-collared macaws feeding right there," and they were so close. But parrots, who can be very skittish when they're feeding, they don't seem to be so skittish. And then on the blue-winged macaw on the right was a picture that I took. The gray background is gray because there was this horrible storm coming in, and the clouds were nasty, dark gray. But the storm was coming in from east to west. So it was starting to pass over. It was over us, but the sun was still shining at sunset under the edge of the clouds. So we get that beautiful light on the birds. About 5 minutes after this picture was taken, it started to pour rain, and I had to run back to the car. I got pretty wet, but my camera did okay. And then I almost didn't put this picture in because I don't have great pictures of this macaw. They're okay, but they're not great. This is the red-fronted macaw. Endemic to Bolivia. There are somewhere between 150 and 300 of these birds left in the wild. Conservation efforts are ongoing. I'm trying to get people to stop poaching the birds and trying to stop them from killing them because they eat the peanuts that are grown in the area. And it's one of those time will tell things. Hopefully the population will start to go up. And now we're into the Amazon parrots. These are the words I said when you see them. This is the smear of them called white-fronted Amazons or white-fronted Amazon parrots. And that's again because people are trying to change the name to parrot from Amazon. But I love calling them Amazons because it tells you what genus they're in. I don't see the point. But anyway, this was a mated pair. The one on the right is on the edge of the nest hollow. You can see in the edge of the hole that's been cut into the tree. When we watched these two birds, a pair of toucans came in to try to raid their nest, and they were big toucans, and these two little birds fought them off. It was kind of fun to see. The red lord parrot, remember we talked about the lords? I think it's really funny because sometimes you'll see this called the red lord parrot, Lord, like it's royalty or something. And it's just misunderstanding that the reason it's called red lord is because its lores are red. I think it's kind of funny. Lilac crown parrot looks a lot like the red lord parrot. They're very closely related. These live in Mexico. Um, it was kind of was this bird had been rehabilitated at a rehabilitation center and was, a wild flying bird, but was quite habituated. So we were lucky to get pictures of it. Another endangered species. the the bird on the left is standing in a tree that's called a candelabra tree, or have those really big seeds on them that the bird on the right is holding in its claw. The parrots are endangered. The araucaria trees are endangered. The birds come, they breed a little bit north of where we saw them, and then they come south in the non-breeding season to bulk up on these araucaria seeds. And if they don't bulk up, then they don't make it through the breeding season. So try to preserve the trees. This is in the Atlantic rainforest. A lot of people don't realize that there's two rainforests in Brazil. There's the Amazon basin rainforest, which is a tropical rainforest. And then on the Atlantic coast of a good part of the south of Brazil, there was another temperate rainforest, sort of like the rainforest up in the Pacific Northwest. There's a lot of rain, but it's not tropical, it's temperate. And a lot of species are not doing well there, as at least 85% of that rainforest has been cut down, and at least half of what's left is fragments. They're too small to do any good. So we went there specifically to see some of the species that were not doing well, because I don't know if they're going to be there much longer. People are trying. There are conservation efforts ongoing, but they got to stop cutting down the trees. This is another bird from another Amazon parrot from the uh, temperate rainforest in Brazil, from the Atlantic coast rainforest. It's called a red-tailed parrot. I actually have a not very good picture where it spread its tail, and you can see that there's a red band on the bottom of his tail. But they're very pretty birds. They were eating fruits from palm trees that weren't coconut trees. They had these kind of purple berries on them, and they were eating them. And this is another bird from the Atlantic rainforest. It's called the venacious breasted Amazon because the purple breast is supposed to be wine colored. I'm not quite sure it makes wine color, but people have imagination. Um, it's the only Amazon parrot that has a red beak. And I had mentioned when I showed you the picture of the cause where the water was seeping out, and I mentioned clay licks. This picture is taken at a clay lick. It's a bankside cliff of clay along a riverbank, along a river. You can see the birds on the left are actually just eating the clay. The bird on the right in flight shows its little red wing speculum. These are called mealy Amazons. Used to be one species of mealy Amazon. It had two separate distributions, one in the South in Central America, in northern Central America, in northern South America, and one in Central America. And then DNA sequencing showed that the species had been separated for a very long time. So now we have a southern and a northern species of Amazons. Um, I mentioned why we think they eat the clay, and there they are, just eating clay. This is the brown-hooded parrot in the genus Parrot. It's a genus of small parrots. Um, these are canopy birds. We were lucky to have one come down to see if it could find any food on this broken off limb. I think it's funny that they're called brown-hooded parrots, but their scientific name means red-eared. And this one you can see that two of them have different amounts on the red of their ear. Some of them have very little, some have a lot. Seemed like a funny feature to pick out for the scientific name. This is the rosy-faced parrot. I have to tell you, I think it's one of the most beautiful parrots. I just love this bird. We made a special trip in Ecuador to see this bird. And they were eating bananas, but we weren't feeding them bananas. There was an abandoned banana farm, and they were eating the bananas that had growing on the tree from this farm. They're certainly not native to the area, but it's to South America even. But the birds didn't seem to care, and they were enjoying them. The bird on the left is on a dead banana leaf that's all curled up on itself. So they were eating bananas. But I just think that blue eye with that pink cheek and the scalloping of the feathers on the head and the gold nape, it's just so beautiful. One of my favorites. And this is an orange-eared parrot. We were just so lucky to see these. We were just driving on the road in Colombia, and there was a group of them feeding on a tree on the hillside by the road so that we were eye level with them, even though they were on the top of the tree because the road was up the hill from them. This bird was thought to be extinct, and a group of Europeans went to find them and they couldn't find them. And they went back 2 years later and they found 89 of them in one valley in the in the Andes Mountains. And a major conservation effort was started. What the problem is that they were dependent on a wax palm tree, the tallest palm tree in the world that grew up there, and they ate the fruit and they nested in the trees. But it was the only palm tree up there. So every year around Palm Sunday, the Catholics would come and cut down some of the trees to get the palm fronds. And the conservationists went to the priests and said, please stop doing that. We'll try to get you from. And the priest said, no, we're going to keep doing it because we need palm fronds. It took them 9 years to get them to stop, but they eventually stopped. And they put up a lot of nest boxes because they, as I said, they ate the fruit and they nested in these trees. So they put up artificial nest boxes, which the birds accepted. And there are now more than 2,000 of them from a population of 89. So there you go, a conservation success story. And I put this picture in for fun because these are lovebirds. Birds in the genus Agapornis are called lovebirds, and they're little parrots, and they're from Africa. All of them are from Africa. One is on Madagascar, so not really quite Africa, but close enough. But these pictures were taken in the Valley of the Sun in Arizona, around Phoenix and Scottsdale. Somehow, some of them got released into the wild, and there's a good population of them now, good self-sustaining population. They don't seem to be hurting anybody, but they nest in saguaro cactus. So there you are. There's two juveniles on the left peeking out of a nest hole, and a juvenile waiting for its parent to come in with food on the right, again in a saguaro cactus. The holes in the cactus are actually made by Gila woodpeckers. The woodpeckers only use them once, though, so they leave the hole behind, and many birds nest in holes in these holes. They're elf owls do, uh, screech owls do. Many birds nest in the holes. Flickers do. But these birds seem to be able to compete well enough to get them, and they like the holes smaller than some of those bigger birds. You can tell the juveniles because they have black on their beak, um, and yellow, and the adult's beak is horn colored, and the adult has more color. But anyway, I went to Arizona to see rose-faced lovebirds. And this was a funny experience. So we were in Brazil, and in the rainforest, and there was a canopy tower there. There's a stairway that's been built to wind around the trunk of a tree to take you up into the canopy. And as we were climbing up, we saw the bird on the left, which is a nice looking red, green and blue parrot. It's in a genus Pyruria, um, uh, which are characterized, if you can see on the bird on the right, they kind of have that chest plate of scalloped feathers. Most of the birds in that genus do. But what's so funny about it is we looked at it and I said, oh, look, it's a Pyrura. And then it turned around. another bird turned around and look at that red belly, just so beautiful, and just my jaw dropped because I wasn't expecting to see this species. Um, it's a having a little bit of trouble because it is so beautiful, and people want them as pets and to breed them. But the species isn't doing too badly because they're a high canopy species. It's hard to get up there to get to them. It really is. If you ever go someplace with a canopy tower, that's highly recommended. Very worthwhile. All right. These are cliff parakeets, a recent branch off of the monk parakeet as a separate species. Like monk parakeets, they build big communal nests out of sticks. Each pair will have their own entrance into a nest cavity, but it's in this big mass of sticks. And these birds do it on cliffs. The sticks are piled up on cliff ledges or in crevices of cliffs. They look exactly like monk parakeets, but their DNA testing made them a different species. One on the left, I love it eating the yellow flowers. One on the right, I love the framing from the branches. This is an orange-fronted parrot seen in Costa Rica. They're a very popular pet bird, so they're in a little bit of trouble from being harvested. They call them half-moon conures. I don't know if anyone's ever heard of them, but we came across three of them eating the fruits in this tree, and we're able to get some pictures. And here's another parakeet from South America, one of the more beautiful. The genus Aratinga consists of these birds that are green with various amounts of yellow on their heads, and chest and belly, and this is just one of the most colorful. You may have seen there's a sun conure that has yellow going down the back, so the more of the body is yellow. But the orange and the yellow are just really pretty. We were lucky. We just saw this. We saw four of them. This one by itself and three others. I was lucky to get a picture. And the last parrot I'm going to show you is this one. This is the red-masked parrot. It's from Peru, but these pictures were taken in San Francisco because this is the species that is the parrots of Telegraph Hill. And they're around the city. They fly by our house here in the city occasionally. See them in Golden Gate Park, see them down on the Embarcadero. And these pictures were taken at the communal garden at Fort Mason. So they're around, and we have parrots that are feral but doing well in San Francisco. I'm confident that's the last slide. Does anybody have any questions for me?
Wow. First thing, wow. I mean, the collection is just amazing.
No, it's very kind of you.
No.